네, 여러분 안녕하세요. 오늘 저희가 또 이렇게 아이온큐 귀빈분들 오셔가지고 인터뷰를 하도록 하겠습니다. 여기 계신 분은 이제 CFO 토마스 크레이머이시고, 이쪽은 이제 IR 담당이시죠. 이제 파이낸셜 플래닝 담당하고 계시는 조던 셰피로 상무님입니다.
Hi, thank you for having us.
Hello, thank you for having us.
Okay, so we have a whole list of questions. So I'll start off by the first one. Will IonQ be able to demonstrate photonic interconnect by the end of this year, like Peter mentioned on Q1 earnings call?
So yes, the goal is to complete those milestones for photonic interconnects that we announced on the Q1 call. And so we've completed that first milestone, which we're excited to be able to share.
From Dr. Rottler, he told us that this might be implemented into the actual product maybe sometime after Tempo. So can we get like an estimate of when it will be applied?
That's right, we haven't announced exactly which architecture, and in part that's because we're still designing architectures for future computers. But we know that Tempo won't require photonic interconnects to hit its AQ levels.
And then for error correction, how about error correction?
So Tempo, we also believe we don't need error correction. When we had our analyst day last September, one of the exciting announcements there was that we didn't think we would need error correction to get to AQ64 using Tempo. We thought that we can do it with error mitigation. And so that's the same concept. We believe that we will get to Tempo without photonic interconnects and without needing error correction to hit our AQ performance level.
But Tempo will contain multi-core technology with additional error mitigation techniques.
That's right. That's the plan. But the idea is for Tempo to, come out with a new set of techniques in multi-core.
It's important to also understand why are we talking about photonic interconnects when we're saying it's not going into our next generation computer. That's because we want to expose the underlying technology to make people understand that while this sounds different, difficult, maybe strange, these are very well understood scientific concepts, and we are just implementing the steps needed to implement that technology. And we want to give people an insight into how that is done along the way. And when it comes to error mitigation, for instance, there are many ways of doing error mitigation. And what we have found is that there are ways to implement error mitigation that's less taxing on the computation. And when we can implement this is better for time to solution. And these are all things that we're working on, and that is fun to share when we get to talk to people like you and others.
Please elaborate on the comments made by Peter about taking loads from NVIDIA. Is hybrid quantum processing being tested, or are there any plans to deploy this for AI at scale?
So we don't believe that Peter intended it to sound like NVIDIA is going to ship us jobs that require us to process them. That what we do know about machine learning is that it is so intensive on computers that it will not be economical to get them done on NVIDIA cards when what you need is so intensive and you will need so many cards for such a long time. It's estimated that most large language models today need an average of 3 months of an entire data center's worth of computation. And when you can run things on a quantum computer that requires fewer iterations, fewer input variables, and in addition often have a more prescriptive output, that's when people will select from other computational methods onto a quantum computer.
So it might take some time for people to realize that.
We absolutely do not think that NVIDIA will be out of business. And in fact, we welcome the opportunity to coexist with NVIDIA.
Please update us on the Dell partnership and how Salesforce, as Peter previously stated, will help us sell quantum computers.
Yeah, so we have a partnership with Dell, and we are very excited about having the ability to work through Dell. The reality is that the quantum space is still in its infancy, and so we're not able to get the full use of all the thousands and thousands of Dell salespeople. But they are getting trained, they are getting inculcated with the information about quantum, and so they will be there when the market is ready to take a third-party salesperson to go and buy quantum from. Right now, we are being introduced through them.
So one of the reasons why Bill joined IonQ's board of director also goes with it.
Yeah, it's very helpful to have someone who has managed Dell's sales force in terms of helping to usher that partnership forward.
Right now, the most immediate impact from Bill joining our board is because he knows how this works. It's not that he can necessarily go and take our quantum computer and throw it into the hands of customers, but what he can do is he can help us market ourselves towards compute buyers. And he already has had many conferences with our head of sales, Rima Al-Medin, and it's fantastically useful to have somebody on board who can do that for us.
Does IonQ have enough cash until turning to profitability, and when do you expect to reach BP?
So, while we haven't given any current forecast beyond the end of this year, one of the good things about quantum computer is that they're so expensive. Now, on the one hand, it's not good that not everybody can buy one right now. But on the other hand, while we are in this phase of our existence, it's good that each quantum computer sells for so much money that it helps pay for the time it takes for us to get up to scale. And so we believe that our cash reserves are very helpful to us. And by the act of selling computers, that is actually adding to the cash balance. It's not like we're just burning down our cash balance.
So many people think the IonQ's cash run rate is between 2 to 3 years. So people are worried if IonQ could really, generate a lot of revenue or not. So can you elaborate on those parts too?
That's just as Thomas was saying, where we haven't put out a specific break-even point as guidance into the market beyond this year. But also to what Thomas was saying, the fact that we have cash inflows at some point starts to offset the outflows as well.
Regarding the $500 million shelf offering, what kind of companies are being considered as IonQ's M&A candidate?
We've never made any specific announcements about specific companies that we're targeting, but we've always said that we would look to acquire companies opportunistically if they can accelerate IonQ's technology roadmap. And so in the case of the Entangled Networks acquisition that we announced last year, that was a great example where we found a team that was well aligned to what it was that we were doing technically, and they've gone on to become leaders in the company on the technology front.
The webinar that got cancelled, it's rescheduled for now, but is there a reason why it was cancelled?
I am absolutely sure there was a reason. I don't necessarily know, but I imagine that it was scheduling. And the fact of it is that we haven't given many webinars. Typically, tech companies, they have one with regularity, and it just comes up. And there was a lot of importance given to this webinar, mostly by outsiders. And so we were focused on other things at the time that was rescheduled. It is scheduled to happen on Friday,
Korea time. Thursday US time.
Yes.
Yeah.
While we think it's an exciting webinar, we don't think it's one that changes the fundamental reason for why quantum is good, or why we've always said that we're winning the space race, today's space race, which is quantum, but we will absolutely give some more insight into how we're doing it. And we look forward to hoping that all of you listen in. But we also look forward to giving more of these so that they become more of a regular occurrence and so that people can use it as a way to continually learn about IonQ.
That's right. A big company will run webinars all the time, will run events all the time, and I think there's a lot of focus on IonQ given our stage today, and like Thomas said, given that we haven't done a ton of webinars. But eventually you want these to become very routine things, and they're just as much to update the community about what it is we're doing, as they are about attracting customers to IonQ and continuing to sell our products.
Recently, Q Control published that by using their software on IBM's 127 qubits QPU, they were able to outperform of optimization problems than the results of Continuum or D-Wave, which was shocking for us. Is IonQ working on software or algorithm side, just as Q Control is doing, or are there any partnerships regarding?
So IonQ is working on software, and we've always said that we're a full stack company.
Right.
And the paper that you're referring to, I haven't personally gone through, so I can't comment on that paper. But I would say we are frequently using software techniques, and we explain to the market when we do. So for example, when we use new software techniques to improve our latest algorithmic qubit performance benchmark, we spoke to the market a little bit more about what those were and how we use them. And so we're going to continue using software and hardware in tandem, being that best quantum system company that we can be.
So for IonQ, what is the proportion between the hardware person and software person?
It's a good question.
That?
I don't know if I know off the top of my head, but it's fair to say we have a lot of hardware people and we have a lot of software people.
So it seems IonQ have hired a lot of marketing and sales people, including CRO Rima, which seems to cost a lot to IonQ. But when do you guys expect to see results?
So we are already seeing those results. And by having a sales force that's trained and also the marketing headcount that is trained on bringing on deals and nurturing leads, bringing them into prospects, is what allows us to give a high expected bookings number for the year, and indeed also allowed us to raise it because we now have data points that allows us to see when probabilities change. And it was maybe easy to do that when we just went public in 2021. Now there are so many prospects and leads going on that we need a dedicated staff to follow them. And as a CFO, I agree, sales and marketing is expensive, but it's more expensive not to have them.
So it's like investing.
It's investing, but and I've worked in technology all my life. The hardest thing to do is actually sales and marketing, because now you're trying to convince somebody outside of your organization about something that you live and breathe and something that you really believe in, but the other people have to spend money on it. Whereas if you are developing something, be it software or hardware, you have a goal. But if it's on sales, it's not an amount of people. It is enough people to try to do what you do, but you're still trying, and there's another person who makes the decision. So it's very normal to have a very big sales and marketing org, which we do not.
But it's true that IonQ have recently hired a lot of sales and marketing people recently, right?
Yes, but remember that when we went public, we didn't have any.
Right.
Right. And so we've spoken on earnings calls about growing that team because we saw the growing demand on the customer side, and we thought it was appropriate to start building the sales and marketing organizations. But I don't think anything in the past, few months or 6 months, call it, has been outside the norm in terms of our rate of hiring those individuals.
Many people concerned that the IP contract with Duke and Maryland ends on 2026 July. So is IonQ planning to renew the contract? If not, what are the plans?
So the patent capture agreement that we have with Duke is up for renewal in 2026. It has 2 renewals that are granted if we agree on the price, and we have already executed one of those renewals, and we plan to negotiate the second one closer to 2026. It's open to be renewed at that time.
Okay.
And I think that neither one of us would like to negotiate it prior to when we should be negotiating it.
Is IonQ collaborating with ARLIS at the University of Maryland? I think the purpose of that question is is $50 million contract coming from, where ARLIS got funded from Department of Defense.
Got it. So while IonQ has many collaborations with UMD, we don't have a current direct relationship with ARLIS. Now, do we think that there could be one in the future? Of course, and we would welcome such a partnership. But the numbers that Peter mentioned on the earnings call were not especially targeted at ARLIS.
Oh, okay.
Or at any specific
Or any specific
contract.
organization. It is an amalgamation of all the leads and opportunities that we have in our funnel.
So it's not like a single contract, it's more of cumulative of
That's right.
any contract. What operational differences will Peter have in the chairman of the board of directors and CEO role versus just being the CEO?
That's a very interesting question. In the US, for technology companies, I believe something like 70% of companies, the CEO also has a chairman role.
Okay.
Now, for governance reasons, you don't want any one person to control a public corporation
Right.
too tightly. So when you have that situation of having a CEO and the chairman being the same person, then you also have to appoint a lead independent director. And that should be somebody else on the board so that you can balance the interests between insiders and outsiders. And so I don't actually know that Peter will have a very much different role, both in the board and the company, but functionally, he will be the person who calls the board to order. In the US, most board work don't actually happen on the board itself. Most of the board work happens in committee. So you have three very important committees. There's the audit committee that deals with all things accounting related and SEC filing related. There is the compensation committee that governs how people be paid, both employees and board of directors. And then there's a governance committee, which works on finding the right members of the board. It also helps with finding executive members in the company. And on various other duties, like they're involved in ESB filings, etc. So, but all the interesting stuff happens in the committee, and then when the committee has done the work, it comes up to the board, and if things require a full board vote, it goes to vote. But otherwise, the board couldn't function. So we don't anticipate the board or the company functioning very much differently with Peter as the chairman.
We saw that IonQ is building a quantum data center and new office in, I don't know how to pronounce this, Arles?
In,
Arlesheim?
right outside of Basel,
Yeah,
Switzerland. Yeah.
What is the purpose of that?
So that's in relation to the work that we're doing with Quantum Basel, which, if you remember from last year, we sold 2 systems, 50% of each system, of a Forte Enterprise, and also of a Tempo. So Quantum Basel invested in not just our current generation, but the next generation of hardware. And so we're building that data center and office to host those systems, and that will be our first data center out in the European region.
So is it like half owned by Quantum Basel and half owned by IonQ?
So we manage the data center, and Quantum Basel will have access to half of the time on each computer. Think of it as system access. It so happens that the systems are local.
So the purpose of that is to generate revenue from European region?
Quantum Basel themselves is a customer of ours, right? So the purpose is to have our data center out there to be another great space for us to build systems. It's convenient to have an office on European time for many reasons, for customer interactions, for prospect interactions as well. And so we're lucky to have a great space to work in, and we're already working to assemble our first Forte Enterprise system there. It will be delivered from Seattle to Quantum Basel. We're assembling components, I should say, in the Basel location today.
I don't think you guys can answer this question, but is there a plan to have a branch in Asia region? sometime in the future.
We haven't announced anything of that nature, but what we'll say is anything's possible, and we've enjoyed our time being here.
Okay.
Yeah, but also it depends on where we see opportunities, and we want to be close to the customers. And so if the opportunity set is rich enough and well enough developed, then we will have many offices. But we also need to take one step at a time, and we are supremely happy with the data center that we're building in Europe that will be to a very, very high standard that will allow us to have a failover capacity from the US. It also will enable us to do load balancing so that we are able to give the capacity to customers at the right time.